Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Last Call with B.J. Edwards.
And we are back. We do have a caller on the line, and we'll get to them shortly. I want to thank all of you for your prayers. I want to thank all of you for your support. I want to especially thank all the groups that have been helping Dr. Kent Hovind, Pastor Kent Hovind in Pensacola. We do have on the phone Joshua from the Pensacola area, and welcome, Joshua, to Last Call.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
And I want to get a little background information on you, Joshua. I understand that you do live in the Pensacola area. And how long have you known Dr. Hovind?
Well, honestly, I grew up listening to his seminars and kind of digesting his information. And eventually, I went to work for him as his head of apologetics and was able to get fairly well. And so I've worked for him for a few years, and I've just been trying to shine light and make noise down here and try to get a little justice in this situation.
Yeah, I remember that Minutemen met you down there at the trial in January, February, March.
Yes.
You had your family down there with you.
Yes, I did.
Oh, my goodness. Is that good for your family to be exposed to this?
Well, a lot of people would say otherwise, but I believe it is. I believe that we're all supposed to be active, and it's good training on the ground for them, and they see that this is not just a pew-warming kind of Christianity, but an active Christianity that actually gets out and tries to make a difference in our world.
Yeah, Josh, we always encourage our listeners to take the field and to do something, even if it feels uncomfortable. As a matter of fact, I have found in my history that the more uncomfortable it is, the better the results are. And I see that uncomfortableness as kind of Satan throwing something at me to make sure that I'm really serious about what we're doing.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. I've often thought, because I do street evangelism, and I've often thought that I never feel more like a Christian than when I'm exposed to the shame and reproach of the cross by doing street evangelism or activism, because that is the message of Christ. He told us to take up our cross and to follow him, and he took on public reproach, and that's what we're called to do.
So you've taken up your cross. You're standing in front of a courthouse. You have a brother who's being persecuted. Tell me about that. Why are you doing? Don't you have better things to do than that, Joshua?
Well, I definitely have to lead a busy life, but I think there's a very important cause here. Like David said right before he went up to face Goliath, is there not a cause? And Pastor Niemöller in Germany once stated, they came for the socialists, but I wasn't a socialist. They came for the trade unionists. I wasn't a trade unionist. And then he goes down the list, and then he finally says, and then they came for me, and no one spoke up because there was no one left. And that's the way I see this case, brother. This is a case of Christian persecution, political persecution, and if we don't stand up for one of our own now, it's only a matter of time until it's you and me.
Wait, this is a tax evader, Josh. Come on.
Oh, yes.
This is a tax evader. Who, don't we throw these guys in jail and throw the key away?
Isn't it amazing that is the word on the street, that he's a tax cheat, he's a tax protester, they busted him he should have just paid his taxes. He was never even so much as charged with not paying his taxes. That was only a media urban myth that was introduced into the public dialogue for some reason to, I guess, discredit him. The fact of the matter is he was never put away for his own personal taxes. He was charged primarily, originally, 10 years ago, or almost 10 years ago, with structuring bank transactions. And all that means is he conducted transactions with his banks in amounts less than $10,000 because in order to catch drug dealers, there's this stupid law that says if a bank receives a transaction in a greater amount than $10,000, then they need to report that to the IRS, and that way they can look out for drug dealers. Well, he wasn't drug dealing. He wasn't doing anything illegal. He was following the law. He's following the Constitution and just doing business with his bank, trying to pay for ministry expenses. And usually his bank withdrawals were around $9,000. And so they came back and said, for the past 2 years, every time you did this, we're going to add up that money. Not only are we going to charge you with structuring, criminal structuring, but we're going to now say you owe us that money. So it's kind of adding insult to injury. Not only did they say that he was basically a drug dealer in essence, they're throwing a drug dealing law against him.
They're worse than a rapist?
But they're they even said he's worse than a rapist. They're throwing everything at him. But then on top of it, they confiscate his property to pay for a debt he doesn't even owe.
Well, but again, just for clarification for the audience, the IRS said to him, this money that you were using to pay your bills was really our money because you were guilty of a law that doesn't even apply to you. Is that pretty much what we're talking about?
Let's put it in perspective for the average listener here. Let's say you have a business and, you're doing everything legally, you're doing everything by the book, not trying to get away with anything, and you go down to your bank once a week and you deposit or withdraw, it doesn't matter which one, let's say, $9,000 because you've got a lot of business expenses or whatever, you've got a lot of checks coming in and you're just doing regular business. They come in and they say, all right, that $9,000 you just withdrew last week, we own it because we decide that you were withdrawing $9,000 instead of $10,000 in order to get around the bank telling us about your transaction. So because we think that you were being sneaky about doing a normal legal bank transaction, we're going to put you in prison for that, and we're going to take the $9,000 that you've already spent. So tell you what, just give us your car instead. That's basically what they did to Kent Hovind, but on a massive scale.
Yeah, I hear you, brother. It's interesting. And I'll get into this maybe later with you, or we could do it now. One of the things that we talked about on the program is our laws are designed to protect the innocent.
That's the intent, yeah.
What I can see here, I don't see any damage to anybody other than the IRS's feelings.
Exactly.
Which is really good.
I don't know if I'm jumping the gun here, but let me talk just a moment about what I think is going on, because I think there is a deeper agenda here. Not only did he hurt their feelings, but he has been doing something that is only recently come into vogue, and that is he's been criticizing the IRS for decades. He's been exposing governmental corruption. He's been talking about powerful people like the Federal Reserve, the banksters, and so he's been very some would call it political minded. In some of his presentations, especially seminar number 5, The Dangers of Evolution, where he ties in the philosophy of evolution to humanism and how humanism is essentially the religion of the global elites that are exploiting our democracy, exploiting our government, and ruining this country. They're trying to lead us ultimately to a new world order, to the Antichrist. And so Kent Hovind connected those dots. And I think for that reason, he was a dangerous person in their mind, and they had to find something. Now, some people are saying they think he was put away because he was teaching creation. Well, I don't know if I would go that far, because there's a lot of creationists out there who aren't getting locked up. But I think it was because he actually connected the dots and showed how evolutionary philosophy leads to totalitarianism, leads to tyranny, and he was pointing fingers. And they had to do something to silence him, and so they found something, basically. They came up with something.
Yeah, he's touched somebody, and I think that's what happened with the 2 Peter 3 group. I don't know exactly why he was acquitted of all charges, what prompted that, but I think
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, but I think somewhere along the line that group, and it could have been because of the social media, it could be because of the contacts we've made. I don't know, but somewhere along the line, I think that we 2 Peter 3 touched somebody. Yeah. And that somebody said, you know what, this is getting a little too hot. No thanks.
Well, the Lord uses means. I mean, we try to be vessels. It was kind of a grassroots movement. There was no real top-down hierarchy. I mean, there were some people who were a little more prominent than others, and we all did our part. And we did make a lot of light and noise, and that's what Kent Hovind asked us to do. He referred to Gideon's example. He said, look, when you're outnumbered, make a lot of noise and shine some light on justice. And because, typically predators, and that's what they are, like to work in secret, in private. And when you expose them to the public, it gets a little hot for them. So I think there's some of that in play. But I also do believe that this was an intervention by God. I mean, I was there for this new trial, just to, recap in a nutshell. They came back at him right before he was supposed to get out after serving nearly a decade, and they said, okay, you have been trying to keep the property that we seized from you through legal means, through filing court documents. That's contempt of court, and because you sent those legal documents through the mail, that's mail fraud. So he's essentially being charged again. So it goes back to trial in March. And I sat in on some of the trial, and I got to tell you, I was scared. It was bad. It was dark. They brought in the highest-paid attorneys, the most flamboyant speakers, and, they were just razzling and dazzling that jury. And it looked very, very bleak. And God, I think, just kind of reached in to that courtroom and confounded it, because they were only able to come back with a conviction of contempt. All other counts were hung. the jury was hung. They couldn't reach a decision. We later found out, I don't know if your listeners know this, we later found out by one of the jurors who got back to us after the case, and he said, look, I'd like to tell you what happened in there, because it was 11-1 in favor of convicting him on all counts. And one juror said, I heard you guys out there talking about jury nullification, and I decided this law was being misapplied, that they had been targeting this man, and I stood out, and I would not compromise. And so because of that, it was like God had conducted a miracle, and so they weren't able to convict him on anything other than contempt. And then they came back to retrial here a week ago, and right at the last moment, just when they were ready to pull the trigger, they announced they're dropping all the charges. I mean, there's just no explanation for that. Now, like I said, God does use means, and I believe that there was something to do with, the legal team we had been able to put together. We put a brief in that was very convincing, I think, about his innocence, and I think that had something to do with it. But I think God was at work overall.
I couldn't agree with you more, Josh. I really couldn't. This is just, and think about this. Think about what Josh just said. You've got a juror of your peers, and I would even question that, because I was in the courtroom. And I heard the questions, which made no sense to me. I know that there was a couple pastors there that were part of the jury pool, but they didn't make it to the jury. And then I would consider at least one of those to be a peer. I don't know. But it's just one juror. One thing had to happen. If this one juror had not stood up for Kent Hovind's right, for the law, if he had not stood up, he or she had not stood up, Kent would have been convicted, and it's a whole new, it's a different ball game. It's much more difficult to get that overturned. Right. But because it was hung up like that, what eventually happened is not only did he get acquitted, but the conviction on the other side, or the contempt of court, was overturned. Which is
and that was interesting too. That goes to show. I think that shows you just how corrupt our system is. The reason it was overturned is because it had to be overturned. Because, well, here's what happened. I'll try not to get too technical, but basically, on count 3 of the injunction against him, there were two court orders that they were arguing he was in contempt of, and the judge instructed the jury to decide when they convicted him, or if they convicted him, which you knew they would, which injunction is he in violation of, or is it both? They came back with only one injunction. They said he's only in contempt of one injunction, and it just so happened that he wasn't even named in that injunction, and they never even discussed that injunction in court. So how was a jury able to convict him of something they had never even heard evidence introduced to discuss? I think that just goes to show you just how corrupt our system is. It's really a matter of razzling and dazzling the jury more than presenting actual evidence.
Joshua, when I first got involved with this, and I knew of Kent, have met him on 3 different occasions when he was here in Ohio. Was very impressed with him, obviously, and he has helped me out tremendously in terms of my faith. He's really strengthened the foundation of my faith. I found out that he's a creationist. At one point in my life, I didn't really think it made any difference whether I was created or evolved. It just didn't make any difference. And as I'm listening to him, I'm going, oops. It does make a difference, okay? It does make a difference. And then, whenever I get my faith tested, whenever it gets tested, I have the foundation of creationism to stand on. That's an incredible foundation, and it's invulnerable. And I've had a lot of attacks, as have others. We are, what I'm starting to say, a long way around here, is that it isn't just Dr. Kent Hovind that's on trial in Pensacola, Florida. The church in America is and still is on trial in Pensacola, Florida. They're in trial. They're going to be in trial in Alabama. They've been in trial in Indiana, and we failed miserably there. In Arkansas, we have not, and I caution my listeners all the time, we have not gotten into the game. And I use the analogy that when you go to college, you take business courses and you read all these books and you get the A's on the courses, and then you go out into the real world and all of a sudden you get smacked, or on a football field, you get your nose bent out of shape. It's a different ball game. It's not quite what you read in the book, is it?
Right.
It shows you that you need to get into the game because it does so much for your witness, for your Christianity, for your soul.
That's true. And, you know, I do believe there is a war against Christianity, but I would like to make a distinction because it's easy to just think, okay, black and white, they're against Christians, they hate us. Anything with God on it, they're going to hate. But there's a subtle distinction that needs to be made here. There is a false Christianity as well, one that preaches, feel-goodism, sit around and don't ever judge, don't ever make strong stands, don't ever preach, just get along with everybody. And that Christianity, there is no war against. There's a move to, I believe, blend all the world religions into one, and to do so, you have to kind of negate fundamentalism. And so I would say there's a war against fundamentalism, fundamental Christianity. The Christianity that stands on the Bible, on the authority of Genesis, of the creation account, on all of these things. When we actually take the Bible literally, that poses a threat to the world system because it stands against God and His authority. It rests on humanism and man's authority. So yeah, we need to come together and fight this because, like Dr. Hovind always said, there's a war going on. Don't ration bullets. If you can't shoot a gun, carry ammo. In other words, do something. Find something to do to further God's kingdom in this world because it is a battle. Make no mistake.
Yeah, I appeal to you, brothers and sisters, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree with one another in what you say, and that there be no divisions among you. That you be perfectly united in mind and thought. And you're bringing up a great subject. A couple things. I always tell my listeners that there is an 11th commandment, apparently 11th commandment that's not written in the Bible, but it's the greatest commandment, and that is, thou shalt not offend. And I hear that so much from my Christian brothers and sisters. And Satan does not have to convince us. He just has to confuse us.
Right.
And we're running
cast
around.
Doubt.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
He just casts doubt.
Yeah. And he's great with that. A liar from the beginning.
Right.
You said you worked with, you did work with Dr. Hovind. I'm not accusing you of not working with him. You had worked with Dr. Hovind. Tell me about Kent Hovind, the man.
Well, I came in right after he was arrested, so I've only my dealings working with him were via the phone or correspondence. But I did get to work with him in that regard, and I was able to work with a lot of people who had actually known him, personally up close, including his son. I was quite close to his son, worked hand in hand with him. And I got a feel for Kent Hovind, and I can tell you, he is a man. Now, it's easy for us to kind of idolize someone who is, is larger than life like Kent Hovind is, but he's got his regular flaws like the rest of us. So I don't mean to put him on some sort of artificial pedestal. A lot of people tend to go one extreme or the other. But on the other hand, Kent Hovind is a unique man, I believe, in that he is, if there's something that needs to be done, he's going to do it. He's not going to rest until it's done. And that's how he was with the evolution argument. He saw that it was damaging people, it was hurting kids, it was making them lose their faith, et cetera, and he just went after it with passion and vigor, and I think we need more Christians like that. So as a man, I had some exposure to him. I do think he's quite a person to imitate and to follow, but never put a man too high on a pedestal because, I could point to my flaws, I could point to his flaws, and some have done that in recent articles trying to say he's a horrible person. They pointed out some of the flaws he has, and my answer to that is, he's a man. Go figure. What do you expect?
Yep, great points. Joshua, we're going to go on a break here shortly. Can you come back? Can you come back after the break with us? Okay. Appreciate some of the things we might want to talk about is Romans 13, because the church tells us, hey, if the government says it, then follow it, right?
Yes.
Just blindly follow it. Should we be concerned about without prejudice? Yes. Pastor Hovind, Dr. Kent Hovind, was acquitted, but it was without prejudice. What does that mean, without prejudice?
Yeah.
And what should this Kent Hovind experience say to Christians, and what would you personally, Joshua, like to see the church do with regard to situations, not just about Dr. Hovind, but other situations? And finally,
great, let's talk about it.
Yeah, and finally, this is something I would love to see.
This is just good stuff, really good stuff.
I would love to see a Bill Nye and a Dr. Hovind debate.
Yes.
I would just, I know, I've seen if Bill Nye would agree to it, and I don't think he would. I don't think he's that crazy.
No, I doubt it.
I don't think he'd have to be. Satan would really have to blow his ego up for him to do that.
Right.
But anyway, we're gonna take a quick break. You're gonna hear a little music, and then we'll be back with you in a couple minutes.
Wonderful.
Alrighty. This is B.J. Edwards. This is your last call. WTVOradio.com.
Last call with B.J. Edwards. Real talk about real life on WTVOradio.com.
We are back along with Mr. Anderson. This is B.J. Edwards, and you're listening to Last Call on WTVOradio.com. Our call-in number is 614-423-4220. We do have Joshua from the Pensacola area that has been following Dr. Hovind very closely. We've been having a great discussion about what is going on in Pensacola. And when we last talked, Joshua, are you with us? Are you still having there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. It's I think we're back with you, and I appreciate that. I mentioned something about Romans 13. When it comes to Dr. Hovind's case, shouldn't Dr. Hovind have just, bent his knee to Rome and in the United States and said, okay, I'll do whatever you say, because that's what we're supposed to do?
Well, that's the funny thing about Romans 13. It's one of the very few passages lost or wicked people know about. Unfortunately, they don't know enough about it to actually apply it correctly. Romans 13 never tells us we're supposed to unquestioningly submit to unjust government. Especially if you look at the examples in the Old Testament, you find several stories of righteous rebellion against tyrants. And in this situation, Kent Hovind, I believe, portrayed the Christian attitude. That is, he tried to get along, he tried to do what was right, he tried to obey any laws, but the law is arbitrary these days. The law is no longer a constitutional republic. It is really the whim of the oligarchy. And so it changes. It's a moving target. And I've actually seen a book. I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with the premise of the book, and I believe it's called 3 Felonies Before Supper, or something to that effect. And the guy argues that the situation in America now is so bad that the average American adult commits 3 felonies before bedtime and doesn't even know it. Because that way they can selectively apply these random and arbitrary laws to get someone if they don't like them. And in this case, it was Kent Hovind. They didn't like what he was saying. So they found something to convict him on. So I believe Christians should try to obey the law as Romans 13 teaches. But Romans 13 also explains what a higher power is, what a truly just government is that that requires our obedience. It says they're a terror to bad works and they're a rewarder of good. And if a government does not reward good and does punish good, well, then that's not a biblical power according to Romans 13. And so we don't owe unquestioning allegiance to a power that is not actually protecting the innocent and punishing the evildoers.
You're kind of backing into one of the questions I think I asked before the break, is what should the Kent Hovind experience say to Christians, and what would you like to see the church do with regard to situations like Kent's? And as you were talking on last week's show, we talked about how the laws have gone from common sense and biblical standards to emotions and feelings.
Exactly.
And how dangerous that has become. And that's why we're even talking about sodomy being the same as a marriage between a man and a woman. We're doing that because of feelings, not because of common sense, not because we've taken a look at this anatomically and said, oh, well, it doesn't fit. And it doesn't. Yeah. Okay?
It's a shifting goalpost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. But, and again, as our motto at Minutemen United is, as goes the church, so goes the nation. But we also strongly believe that as goes the pastor, so goes the church. And we're trying to get the church to awake. And when I talk about the church, Joshua, I'm talking about the church corporate. I'm talking about the brick and mortar, but I'm also talking about the folks that don't go to the churches on a regular basis, the remnant, if you will. But we all, and again, where there's unity, the Lord commands a blessing.
Right. And
vice versa, if there's no unity, how can you get that blessing? I think that's one of our biggest problems in the church today, and you kind of broached it. You're talking about it earlier, is that we're not united. We're not. It's Mr. Anderson, my cohort here with me. We were talking about how it's all the same spirit, but when you kind of put that spirit into different software, it works differently. That's hard to understand. It's really hard to understand. So let's talk about. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Did you have another thought you wanted to share with us?
No, I'm just listening.
Okay. Well, good. We got a lot of people that do that.
He's a good listener.
That's good stuff.
Talk to me about a fundraiser, a Bill Nye and Kent Hovind fundraiser.
Boy, I like the idea. I've heard it floated out there ever since the Ken Ham debate with Bill Nye, and I think Ken Ham did okay. He kind of stuck to basic principles and tried to stand on the authority of the Word of God, and that was all right. But I kind of agree with you. I don't think anyone would do a better job than Kent Hovind. I would love to see that. I think it would be a great fundraiser. I don't know of any organized effort to make it happen, and I don't know if Bill Nye would be dumb enough to come on board, but that would be quite a show. That would be the debate of the decade for sure.
I'd pay good money to see that. And
oh, yeah.
By the way, with the debate with Ken Ham, what happened in that debate is there's an old saying that he who frames the question wins the debate. Yeah. Early on, Nye put the question out there. And Ken Ham should have said, no, that's not the question. Here's the question. But instead, he went on the defense. Yeah, and started answering defensively. Once you do that, that's kind of like the nature of the law of verbiage. Once you go on that defensive, it's almost automatically assumed that you're wrong. It's like Dr. Kent Hovind, Pastor Hovind, when he went to court, federal court, they very seldom lose those cases. As a matter of fact, it's my understanding that in this particular area, this particular court in Pensacola, this is the first time that not only have they not lost, but they actually won a case.
Yes, this was the first time in 9 years that a defendant won, or at least that they backed down.
Talk to me about cruel and unusual punishment. What does that mean to you?
Well, I guess cruel could be considered somewhat subjective, but as to unusual, there's no doubt that Ken Hovind's sentence for merely using his own bank in a legal manner is by far and away unusual. The punishment they threw at him was 10 years. Just to give you a reference point, they put rapists away on average for about 8 years. I think murderers typically get about 15 years. The judge said, although it disappeared in the transcript that was finally released 2 years later, I think it may have been doctored, but she said, according to several people who were in there who signed sworn affidavits, that his crime was worse than rape. And that's because that shows you what kind of mentality they have, though. They think the government is God, and if you stand up against them, then you've committed the ultimate sin.
But that's not in the court records.
Right. That did not appear in the transcript.
Huh. But people have testified. People have testified under perjury that she did say that. Interesting.
Yes. I think some 8 people have signed sworn affidavits saying they were in there in the courtroom when she said it and they heard her say those words. And yet we tried to get the transcript for, I think, 2 years. And it's supposed to come out, I think, within 3, maybe 6 months at the most. And it finally was made available 2 years later. But it didn't have that phrase in there.
Yep. That is incredible. It's also very telling.
Yes, and so cruel and unusual punishment, yeah, possibly. I mean, it's definitely unusual to put someone away for a decade for just doing business with his bank, essentially, but, not so much in the way the IRS would prefer.
And it's my understanding they also transferred him around a lot.
That's also true, yeah. It's called diesel treatment. They apparently every time they move you in a prison, I mean, there's a new culture you've got to get used to. There's a much higher risk of you getting into fights, maybe even getting killed. You have to restart any sort of applications or motions you've got in the system. Like, for example, as I understand it, Kent Hovind has been trying to be moved to a halfway home or at least home confinement or work release or something like that. But every time he's moved, he has to start that process all over again. He has to, his books don't necessarily go with him. His legal books don't go with him, so he's got to stop working on his case. He's got to wait for those books to come. And in some cases, they didn't come. That's in fact why he filed one of the cases, or one of the documents that he was accused of contempt over. He filed a Bivens lawsuit saying, you've kept my books away from me. How am I supposed to fight or appeal my case without my books? But they keep moving him around. I think 23 times in the past 8+ years have they moved him. 23 times. That's cruel and unusual punishment right there. So they're definitely targeting him and piling it on.
Yeah, I mentioned early on. This has been a month or two ago. When I was in the courtroom, the first day of the courtroom, I looked around and I saw the judge and I saw that stern glasses down on her nose and looking down over the jurors, and I saw the jurors, the ones that were awake, were paying attention, and I saw the prosecutor and the stern and ready to go, and I'm switching over to Dr. Hovind, Pastor Hovind, and he's sitting right in front of me, and he turned around and he looked at me, and I couldn't understand. I felt really funny about his presence there. Just there's something unusual about that. I couldn't explain it. And then the next day, I was out in the courtyard, and I happened to run God is so good. God is so good. I ran across a gentleman that was conducting prison ministry, and Kent Hovind happened to be one of the folks that was in his prison ministry. And he's talking about the prison ministry, and all of a sudden he stops in mid-sentence. It's almost like he was waiting for me to come over. He said, "You know what? Whenever Kent Hovind is around, he's always the happiest man in the room." And then it hit me, Joshua. That's what I was seeing. I wasn't seeing by down in the mouth and being attacked. I saw the typical Dr. Kent Hovind, Pastor Kent Hovind. That's what I saw. He was out of place in that courtroom. He shouldn't have been that Christian witness that he was, and it was a great Christian witness. And speaking of which, and all those transfers and what he's doing now, and look, prison is not a nice place to be. Whether it's in the Santa Rosa County Jail, or whether it's in the federal prison, no matter where it is, no matter what the temperature, it's not a nice place to be. It's not a private place to be. It's not what we want to be into. But in all of that, the thing that has amazed me the most, the thing that Christians should be bringing out, is this man's attitude, his presence, and his ability to save souls. Because that's what he's about. Now, I know that. Gosh, you called in and I'm doing all the talking, right? I know that. I know that he is just so much in love with God, and that I think the IRS tried to say that he wasn't really a church, that he didn't look like a church. Maybe because he didn't have a building, maybe that he was doing services on Sunday. I don't know. But if we are a church and our goal is to save souls, then by all means, Dr. Kent Hovind, Pastor Kent Hovind, is a church. And I would like to compare his record one-on-one with any pastor that I've known, present or past.
That's always been his goal. It's always been to save souls, to win the lost, to shut the mouth of the scoffer, and to bring people to Jesus. And that's what he's doing, no matter where he's at, whether behind bars or not. He's going to try to further the kingdom of God.
And he does so. I know the 2 Peter 3 group has a list of names of prisoners that he's led to Christ.
Yeah. He holds like 2 or 3 Bible studies a day. In all, I'm too human. I could not do what he's doing. I'd be pouting a lot. I mean, I really would be. Come on, I'd be pouting a lot. And I think it's a blessing to him to see the 2 Peter group or the Free Kent Hovind group or his supporters down there. I'm glad he can't get on the internet. I'm glad he can't get on Facebook, because what he's seeing on there would break his heart. People do not understand who he is or what he's about. And I think a lot of folks don't know who he serves.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because he is very familiar, though he doesn't get online now. Before he went away, he was very familiar with the raging animosity against him. But I do believe that he is one of those unique souls that God has prepared for the battle, who is not going to shy away from controversy or negative accusations and attacks. And he's a war horse. He just keeps going.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I know that when you meet Dr. Hovind, this doesn't always come out, but I know it's there. And it's a verse from Philippians: "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. In humility consider others better than yourselves." I believe him to be a humble man. I know that I'm insecure by nature, Joshua. Honest to God, I'm very, very insecure by nature. But if you get in a discussion with me and the Spirit gets into me and we start talking about the Bible, you're in trouble. Yeah. You're just absolutely in trouble. Because I can walk in that. I speak that language.
There you go.
I love it. Well, Joshua, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to call in today. I appreciate you taking the time and the efforts, and including your family. And God bless you. Build a hedge of protection around you. Keep up the good work. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you and the rest of the group that's gotten together. The one thing that concerns me is that if I have one message I want to get to the 2 Peter 3 group and to the Free Kent Hovind group, is that this is not just about Dr. Kent Hovind. God has given you an opportunity. He's let you take a little peek, give you a little bit of light about what's going on out there. Now, I'd like to see this group take what they have, take the resources, take the abilities, take that knowledge, and apply it to the rest of society.
Yeah, because this is ultimately just one battle in an ongoing warfare.
Yeah, it is. That's the point. You said it better than I could. It is a battle. And right now, it looks like we've won the battle, although if you were to speak to Dr. Kent Hovind right now, he'd say, well, if that's true, how come I'm not home?
Yeah.
And that's the last thing we need to talk about is why is, well, he was given a 10-year sentence and it's not over with, right? Well, yes and no. When you serve 85% of that time, you do, one way or the other, get to the home base, your house, and that's not happened to him. Part of it's because of the court case that was thrown against him, but now he's starting to run into red tape, and it's almost like, and I was talking to Mr. Anderson this morning, like, and I'm not starting a rumor, but I'm just saying this could look an awful lot like the government saying, you isn't getting out till 10 years, and if we can keep you in longer, we're going to keep you in longer. And maybe those powers to be that we've touched are saying that. I appreciate everything.
Well, that was my fear. That was my fear when I went into the Monday morning hearing a week ago, and they made it very clear that they were only dropping the charges without prejudice, meaning they were not admitting any sort of faults, that they were still saying they had good grounds for prosecuting him, but that they were just choosing not to. Because what that means is it leaves the door open for them to come back and reintroduce those charges again, and it wouldn't be considered double jeopardy. So I hope they don't, but it almost does make you wonder if they've got more plans, to come after him again, or maybe just if he pokes his head too far out, maybe they can come back and try to keep him in line.
That's my fear as well. It's purposely left there. Okay, we can't win this case now. We can't get you to submit now. But the first time you get a traffic ticket, and we got a prosecuting attorney that wants to make a name for themselves, back you go, go. And I still don't understand how they could keep him out of jail when he's just being accused of something. That never made sense to me. And I know we tried to find somebody that could answer that question, and we tried hard. Nobody was ever able to answer that question, because by all things being equal, he should have been home in February of this year. He's still in jail, and it looks like it might be for another few weeks.
Months, actually.
Months?
Well, as I understand, what they're saying is he was approved to go to home confinement back in February, but because of the new charges against him, that was then overturned or done away with because, he's going to be retried. Well, the retrial was canceled, the charges dropped, so why can't we go back to that February approval and send him home immediately? What they're saying is, no, he's up for review once again in August, and so chances are he'll go home then. So what we're asking people to do is call the BOP, leave a message with whomever you can find, put some pressure on whoever you can talk to, and say, can you expedite the process, cut through the red tape, let this man go home. He's already been in prison for almost 9 years. It's getting ridiculous. The charges were dropped. Just let the man go home.
FreeKentHovind.com, second www.Peter3.com. You can get information.
Org. Second Peter.
Secondpeter.org. I'm sorry. I've got .com.
I think it's .com. It may be both, but I think it's .com especially.
Yeah.
I think we might have gotten a mirror site just to have both URLs.
My mistake.
Yeah. Educate yourself, listeners. Educate yourself. Yeah. If you've not been involved, you're late in the game. but we always can use other hands, and we're going to have other battles, and this is a good place to get some of that rust off of your system for not having done anything. Again, we're trying to get the church together. Joshua, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you and the time you've taken with us today. Like I said before, may the Lord go before you. I'm speechless. Anything else we need to cover that we haven't at this point? And this is Joshua. He's from the Pensacola area. He's been heavily involved with this movement to free Kent Hovind. Kent Hovind is a political prisoner. Like it or not, he is a political prisoner. He has the truth. He carries a price with it, and he's paid a severe price for that. Pray for him. Pray for the movement, and pray for folks like Joshua and Dave Daubenmire and Ernie Land, who have really, really put themselves out. And like I said, Joshua, who I'm on the phone with. Anything else we need to cover, Joshua?
I would just close with this comment. Never say it couldn't happen in America. Never say persecution could come to America. It's already here. Now's the time to fight.
I got you, brother. And never say it can't happen to you, because like you said before, when the Nazis came for the communists, like Niemöller said before, I remained silent. I wasn't a communist. When they locked up the Social Democrats, I remained silent. I was not a Social Democrat. Yeah. When they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out. I was not a trade unionist. When they came for the Jews, I remained silent. I wasn't a Jew. When they came for me, there was no one left to speak out. Along with Mr. Anderson, this is B.J. Edwards. You're listening to Last Call on WTVOradio.com. Our call-in number is 614-423-4220. And we are back. Again, this is B.J. Edwards. This is your last call. The call-in number is 614-423-4220. And we were speaking, just got off the phone with Josh from the Pensacola area, who has been very much involved in the Kent Hovind case. What's going on down there? Very informative. I can't tell you.
Really appreciate him. And he gave.
Can't hear you there.
Can you hear me now?
Well, go again. I'm back with you.
You're not going to hear me in the headphones.
Okay. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, where was it? I just really good detailed information that he gave us. Level-headed man, and speaks the truth along with the rest of us out there. And he's a street warrior. He takes the word where it isn't usually heard. How's that for poetry, BJ?
Yeah, it's good stuff. Good stuff. If I profess in a loudest voice in the clearest exposition every portion of the truth of God except precisely that little point which the world and the devil are at the moment attacking, I'm not confessing Christ, however boldly I may profess in Christ. Where the battle rages, Pensacola, Florida, Montgomery, Alabama, Indianapolis, Indiana, there the loyalty of the soldiers proved. And to be steady on all the battlefield besides is mere flight and disgrace if you flinch at that point. Opportunities abound. Wow. Do they ever. All over the world. In Ireland. In America.
Next door.
That's true. That's true. Dr. Kent Hovind, we've been talking about most of today. He has been acquitted of new charges, but he's still in jail, and it may be a while before he gets out. We think wrongly convicted to begin with, and I think in the end, if Dr. Hovind pursues it, I think that will be the result. But he's not going to be able to do this without the church, without you, not just a remnant, without the pastors. And it's not just about Dr. Kent Hovind. It is about marriage. It's about your children. It's about your family. What type of message?
It's about the truth.
Yep. What type of message are we sending to the world? What type of message are we sending to God? If my people are called by my name. When you use His name, how are you using it? Marriage, Kent Hovind, they're all opportunities. We always encourage Christians to take the field. Always. And if you remember what BJ says about persistent presentation with nominal resistance equals acceptance, that's how we've gotten to the point in this nation where we're talking about legalizing marriage between a man and a woman and a woman, and whatever follows after that. We're just opening up so many of the wrong doors. And we've done that because we've gotten away from common sense. We've gotten away from the Bible. It's so critical. It's so obvious. If you disagree with it, then prove it wrong. But expect a surprise when you try to do that. It is the inspired word of our Creator. It's the inspired word of perfection, of right with no wrong. Try it. This gentleman did, and got a very, 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 very big surprise. Several surprises. But God is so good. God is so good. He didn't punish me for my lack of loyalty. He didn't punish me for my lack of understanding. He was patient with me, and He'll be patient with you. But you have to do something. You have to start something. You cannot avoid your death. That's going to happen. And you can't avoid, well, yes, you can. You can avoid one end of what's going to happen after you die. But you got to get to know Him in order to accept Him. And to get to know Him, sometimes you got to take a step. And we talked earlier about maybe being uncomfortable taking that first step. And that's from Satan. He wants you to feel a little bit of resistance, so you won't do it. Oh, this may hurt, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to go to the least resistance, which we all do. That's kind of a natural thing. But no pain, no gain, right? And with regards to our society and our children, what kind of a message are we sending to them? Laws are teachers. The law is a teacher. That's why it's so important to get all these bad laws passed, because that makes bad people feel better about themselves. And if they're not convicted, if they don't know they're doing wrong, how and why are they going to change? Think about that. How and why are they going to change? It's just so it's so simple once you see it. It's like you go, duh. Oh yeah, it's there all along. God showed it to you daily. He showed it to you hourly, by the minute. He speaks to you in your sleep, when you wake up in the morning, as you're going through your job, as you're talking to other people. And as a Christian, God should speak through you to other people. And you have to speak in order to get to those people. I want to thank everybody that's been involved with Dr. Kent Hovind, Pastor Kent Hovind, all that they've done, the sacrifices that they made, all those folks that were down in Pensacola in March of this year, all those folks that were ready to go down. I want to remind you all, we have 3 opportunities out there. You've got the Gay Pride Parade in Columbus, Ohio. You have June, what is that, June 18th?
June 14th.
June 14th in Washington, D.C. And then on June 6th, you've got Montgomery, Alabama. Here's some websites that you're going to need. www.minutemenunited.org, freekenthovind.com, passtheSalt.com, Salt and Light Brigade, that's .org. Go to any and all those. It doesn't make any difference. Start somewhere. Do something. We want to encourage you to take that first step. We can't do it without you. We've got the eyes, the ears, the nose, maybe the mouth, but not the legs, not the arms, not the hands. That's you. God bless all of you. We thank you for listening in today. Next weekend, we may have a presidential candidate on the air with us. We're working on it. Quite possibly have that, as well the folks from Montgomery. Again, God bless all of you, And thanks for listening to Your Last Call.